There is a number that should terrify you. 310 million. That is the number of cubic kilometers of water sitting in the Atlantic Ocean right now. As you watch this video, that water is moving, shifting, heating, and building pressure that will reshape coastlines, destroy cities, and decide the fate of billions of people. But here is what nobody tells you. The Atlantic Ocean is not just a body of water. It is a time machine, a weapon, a graveyard, and the single most important force that made the modern world possible. In the next 15 minutes, we are going to crack open its deepest secrets, the ones that textbooks skip, the ones that will make you look at every map, every weather report, and every glass of water completely differently. Buckle up. This ride goes very, very deep. The ocean that should not exist. Here is something that will completely rewire how you think about the Atlantic. 180 million years ago, this ocean was nothing. Absolutely nothing. In its place stood a single colossal landmass, Pangaea, where every continent on Earth was fused together like pieces of a broken plate pressed tightly against each other. Then something extraordinary happened deep beneath the Earth's surface. The mantle began to boil. Superheated rock, moving in slow churning currents miles underground, began pulling the continents apart like taffy. First slowly, millimeters per year, then faster. The ground cracked, volcanoes erupted along the fracture lines, and seawater began flooding in. Over millions of years, that crack became a river. That river became a sea, and that sea became the second largest ocean on the planet. But here is the part that will genuinely blow your mind. It is still happening right now. Beneath the Atlantic, running from north to south like the spine of a hidden mountain range, lies the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a 16,000-kilometer-long underwater volcanic mountain chain that is constantly erupting, constantly pushing new ocean floor outward, and constantly making the Atlantic wider. At this very moment, the Atlantic Ocean is growing, spreading apart at roughly 2.5 centimeters per year. The Americas are drifting away from Europe and Africa, slowly, silently, unstoppably. The Atlantic is not a finished ocean. It is a work in progress. The depths that kill. Most people picture the ocean as something that exists near the surface. Beaches, waves, sunlight filtering through blue water. That picture covers maybe 5% of the Atlantic. The other 95% is something else entirely. Drop straight down from the surface of the Atlantic and you enter a world of crushing darkness. At 200 meters, all sunlight vanishes, completely, permanently. From here down, there is no day, no night, just infinite cold black pressure. Keep going. At 1,000 meters, the pressure is 100 times what you feel on land. A human being at this depth, without protection, would not simply die. They would be compressed into something unrecognizable in milliseconds. Keep going. At the very bottom of the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest point in the Atlantic at 8,376 meters, the pressure reaches over 800 atmospheres. The temperature hovers just above freezing. No sunlight has touched this place in millions of years. And yet, life is down there. Ghostly translucent fish with no eyes. Creatures that produce their own cold blue light to lure prey in the darkness. Giant isopods, essentially massive armored sea bugs, crawling across the pitch-black ocean floor. Animals so alien in appearance that early scientists who photographed them genuinely questioned whether they were looking at Earth life at all. The deep Atlantic is not empty. It is alive, in the strangest, most terrifying ways imaginable. The invisible river that rules Europe. In 1513, a Spanish explorer named Ponce de Leon was sailing along the Florida coast when his ship suddenly stopped making progress, despite favorable winds. Something invisible was pushing against them with enormous force. He had discovered the Gulf Stream, and he had absolutely no idea what he had found. What Ponce de Leon had sailed into was one of the most powerful forces on Earth, a river of warm water flowing through the Atlantic, not on its surface like a normal current, but as a massive, organized, continent-scale conveyor belt of heat energy moving at speeds of up to 9 kilometers per hour, carrying more water every second than all the rivers on Earth combined. The Gulf Stream begins in the warm, sun-baked waters of the Gulf of Mexico. It flows north along the U.S. East Coast, then curves east across the Atlantic toward Europe, dumping enormous quantities of tropical heat into the North Atlantic atmosphere. The result? Western Europe stays warm. London sits at roughly the same latitude as parts of frigid northern Canada. Paris aligns with regions buried under permafrost. Without the Gulf Stream acting as Europe's invisible central heating system, those cities would be dramatically colder, potentially unlivable at the population scales we know today. But here is where the story turns frightening. Scientists have recently confirmed what they have suspected for decades. The Gulf Stream is slowing down. Melting Greenland ice is flooding the North Atlantic with fresh water, disrupting the precise salt concentration that keeps the current flowing. Some climate models now suggest the Gulf Stream could weaken catastrophically within this century, triggering rapid cooling across Europe, intensifying Atlantic storms, and disrupting rainfall patterns across 3 continents. The invisible river that built modern civilization is stuttering, and the world is barely paying attention. Blood, empires, and the crossing. For most of human history, the Atlantic was a wall. Ancient civilizations built their worlds around the Mediterranean, around rivers, around familiar coastlines. The open Atlantic was something else, vast, featureless, and terrifying. The Greeks called the waters beyond Gibraltar the Sea of Atlas, and largely left it alone. Many cultures genuinely believed that ships sailing too far west would fall off the edge of the earth. Then came the age of the crossing. The Vikings crossed first. Around 1000 AD, Leif Erikson and his crew reached North America nearly 500 years before Columbus, establishing a settlement at what is now L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland. But they did not stay. They left, and the world did not change. Columbus crossed in 1492. And this time, the world changed forever. Within decades of Columbus's crossing, the Atlantic transformed from a wall into a highway. European ships crossed it constantly, carrying colonizers, soldiers, missionaries, and merchants westward, carrying gold, silver, sugar, and tobacco back east. And then, carrying something that still echoes through history with devastating force. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, the transatlantic slave trade forced approximately 12 to 15 million human beings across the Atlantic in conditions of almost unimaginable brutality, packed into ships with no space to stand, dying of disease, starvation, and violence. Millions never reached the other side. The Atlantic was the road of conquest, the route of commerce, and the road of one of the greatest atrocities in human history. Every crossing changed the world, not always for the better. A living ocean. Pull back from the history. Look beneath the surface again, but this time not into the darkness of the deep. Look at the life. The Atlantic is one of the most biologically productive oceans on Earth. Its cold northern waters, churned by powerful currents that drag nutrients up from the deep, support enormous populations of fish, marine mammals, and seabirds that have sustained human civilizations for thousands of years. Humpback whales move through Atlantic waters on migrations spanning thousands of kilometers, singing songs so complex and so loud that they can be detected by hydrophones hundreds of kilometers away. Blue whales, the largest animals that have ever lived on this planet, larger than any dinosaur, feed in the cold Atlantic, their hearts beating once every 2 seconds, each heartbeat pumping enough blood to fill a bathtub. In the middle of the Atlantic sits one of Earth's strangest ecosystems, the Sargasso Sea. Defined not by coastlines but entirely by ocean currents, this unique region is filled with golden floating mats of sargassum seaweed that host hundreds of species found nowhere else, including juvenile sea turtles that hide within the seaweed mats for the first years of their lives. The Atlantic's warning. Here is the truth that scientists are increasingly alarmed about, and that most people still do not fully understand. The Atlantic Ocean is changing faster than at any point in recorded human history. Sea levels along Atlantic coastlines are rising, not slowly, not gradually, accelerating. Miami already floods during high tides on sunny days. No storm required. New York, Lisbon, Lagos. all face futures where significant portions of their urban coastlines are regularly underwater. The Atlantic is absorbing over 90% of the excess heat generated by climate change, warming in ways that are strengthening hurricanes, bleaching coral, pushing species toward extinction, and reshaping weather patterns across entire continents. And the Gulf Stream, that invisible river we talked about, continues to weaken. Some scientists now use a word they once avoided: collapse. The same ocean that opened the modern world. The same ocean that carried empires and swallowed tyrants. The same ocean that breathes life into the atmosphere of an entire hemisphere. It is sending us a warning. 180 million years ago, the Atlantic was born from the breaking of one world. The question we now face, urgently in our lifetimes, is whether we are watching the beginning of the breaking of another. The Atlantic does not care about our politics, our timelines, our convenience. It operates on geological time, and it is patient. Are we?